There we go. Okay. So thank you for being here. I came up with this idea for this event because we understand what poly is, we understand what non-monogamy is, but I never really see anyone discuss the beginning to the ends of it. More times than not, it's like, huh, we talked and we want to open our relationship, or hey, you know what I figured? Why don't we just go ahead and date multiple people? There's never like that discussion of what led up to, what can be done in the in between, what happens when a relationship ends, being like an overall relationship cycle. So I wanted to bring on our guest, Miss Lavitaloca Sawyer. And so that way we can tackle some questions or some thoughts or ideas when it comes to non-monogamy and that relationship cycle, be it from when it begins of what is it that you're looking for, dating, establishing that committed relationship. I throw in communication because communication is great at all times. Like I'm a proponent of quality communication. And then, of course, when things end, because all things, good or bad, they always must come to an end. And with that, I want to go ahead and give the floor to our guest.
Hello, hello. Thank you everyone for being here. I super appreciate the opportunity to do this. The last event went really well. Like I asked some like wonderful questions, some of them that made me think. And I super appreciated that. And so I'm Evita Lavitaloca Source for those who don't know. I'm a non-monogamy educator, coach, speaker. I'm the subject of the documentary Polylove. And I do a mostly daily polyamory reminder on Instagram at Lavitaloca34. And mostly I just share about my experience with non-monogamy and the different things that, I go through, how I process those emotions, things that I see in the community, and people find that helpful. So that's why I'm sitting here before you today. So Ike actually sent me a group of questions to ask. Now, some of these I may have to ask for clarity on. So hopefully, if you asked it, you can either like drop that down in the chat, or if you want to stay anonymous, you can just send it to me directly. So that way, there's some people that you might not want somebody to know that that was your question, so if there's a way that that's going on, you could just send something to me, like I said, personally. And so the first question that we have here is, how soon do you tell someone that you are poly? So first of all, this is a personal choice. I always feel like conversations around identity come from a place of when you feel most comfortable and most safe being able to do it. Think about any part of your identity. There are some that you don't have to reveal to people because people can see. So most of us, people can see that, we're people of color or we're Black, those kind of things. But like certain things like poly, if you have some kind of queer identity, things of that nature, disclosure and disclosing those things and when is a very personal choice. And it usually is, you're going to do that when you feel most safe to do so. So it's one of those things that like there is no one size fits all answer for how soon do you tell someone that you're poly, but I will say from my own personal experience, I tell people right away. And the reason why I tell people right away is because, and I'm assuming the context that's being referred to is in dating, and not necessarily like maybe platonic relationships or I don't know, coworkers or things like that, which I still pretty much tell everybody right away. So everybody in my life, even my neighbors, know that I'm not monogamous. But for the dating context, the reason why I think it's important to get that out the way as soon as possible is because you don't want to run into someone feeling lied to or misled. And not saying that you lied to them or you misled them, because if they didn't ask and you didn't tell them, you can kind of say, well, you didn't ask. But most people that we are interacting with in a dating capacity, unless you're specifically interacting with people in a non-monogamous community, they are interacting with you with the assumption of monogamy, because that is the dominating, relationship orientation societally. at least on paper. Okay. So in the back rooms, it might be a different story, but on paper, everybody is saying that they're monogamous. So like if you're on a dating app or you meet somebody at a bar or something like that, they are generally interacting with you sort of with the assumption that this person is monogamous. No different than, somebody may meet me, and because I am cisgender and femme presenting, they would assume that I'm heterosexual, even though I'm not. So, and so I think it's really important to tell people as soon as possible, number one, so they're not feeling misled. And then number two, I feel like that's the easiest way to get to people that are going to be okay with your non-monogamy. So I find that when people don't tell people they're poly right away and they take a while, now time has been spent, feelings may have been developed, you have some measure of investment in the relationship, and then you tell the person that you're poly, and now that's lost, because they may have a very caustic reaction to it. They're like, I don't want to do this, or, I feel like you lied to me, or blah, 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 blah. And now that time is lost, that energy is lost. Whereas if you would have told the person right away, they could have, kind of decided for themselves right away that that wasn't going to work for them. And now you're not wasting each other's time, so then, your time isn't wasted. That person's time isn't wasted. I often also feel like we choose not to disclose that to people because, and this isn't, I don't think that this is a malicious thing that people do. I just think it's a human thing. I feel like we go into relationships with people like almost kind of trying to trick them into relationships with us. So like we give them the most palatable like version of ourselves, because we want to kind of lure them like into, a relationship with us. And I think that like desire to not tell people that you're poly, and be upfront about that can sometimes come from that place, because that non-monogamy is tricky, and that people have these really like just really like kind of wonky ideas about it. And so it's like, I don't want to tell these people that I'm poly, because if I tell them that I'm poly, they might like really like spaz out about it. And, now I have to deal with that. But I feel like it's just better to just get it out the way as soon as possible, because I feel like that's the quickest way to find your folks, is to, give them the full strength tea of like what you are from the gate, because that way they can kind of easily go, yep, I'm totally for that, or no, that's not for me, and they can kind of move on. So like I said, it's a personal choice when people choose to tell people, obviously when you feel most safest. But in my opinion, and in what I've seen, being in the community for, now almost 9 or 10 years, I just feel like it's better to just tell people right away. And so that way you can avoid, like I said, that people feeling like they've been led on. And then also you can avoid wasting your own time and energy, investing in a relationship that, is eventually, not going to be able to move forward because you're non-monogamous, which you were at the onset, but you just didn't tell them that, So, and so that's how I would answer that. So this question is, at this point, I see myself as a solo polyamorous with partnering aspirations, and I'm really keen on friendship being the core. My question is, how do I know when a relationship has ended or should end versus just changing to no longer include intimacy? And is it okay if my relationships don't end? So the first one is, how do I know when a relationship has ended or should end versus just changing into no longer including intimacy? So I think that's when the feelings change, personally. And I think that's kind of really hard to pin down, because I think you can no longer have, and I'm assuming what you mean by intimacy is no longer including sex. Because relationships can be totally intimate without sex. And so I'm assuming, that you mean by when it's, no longer includes intimacy, that you mean it no longer includes sex. And so I believe that it's when the feelings change. So like, I'll give you an example. And this is actually really funny. So when my marriage ended in September, me and my husband still had sex. We still slept, we still slept together. It wasn't, we didn't sleep together after the relationship ended, like after he like officially called it, the sex stopped after that point. But there was a period of time beforehand where I literally said to him, like, I was like, I don't feel like I have a romantic partner. I feel like I have a roommate that I occasionally have sex with. That's what it felt like. It just like the energy was just gone. Like the romantic energy was just gone from the relationship. And we still had sex. So I think that the choice to end the particular kind of relationship that you're in with the person isn't so much about what you do or don't do with the person, so much as what you feel or don't feel like showing up to. So if you no longer feel like showing up to romance with that person and you have a romantic relationship, if you no longer feel like showing up to friendship with that person and you have a friendship with that person, I think that's when you start to question whether or not the relationship should continue. Because, and especially in non-monogamous spaces, we've learned to sort of not see relationships from a space of, well, this relationship is this particular thing because we do this particular thing in it. So you have friends that you sleep with, romantic partners that you don't sleep with, partners that you don't live with, queer platonic partners that you do, like, you know what I mean? So we've learned how to pick and choose these things that we normally place in, well, this goes in this box and this goes in that box and this goes in that box. And we've sort of kind of thrown that out and said, okay, well, you might be a friend, but I still sleep and cuddle with you because that's what we do, but we're still calling ourselves friends because that's the energy that we have. That's what we're agreeing that we're doing with each other. Or like I have a romantic partner, we don't sleep together because that's not there, but we're very romantic. This person is a romantic partner. That's the feeling that's there in the relationship for me. So I feel like it's not so much the things that we do in a relationship that signal whether or not it needs to end or not, so much as the feeling that is there. What do you feel in yourself that you want to continue to show up to in relationship with this person? So if you don't have, sexual intimacy, but you still feel like showing up to romance with that person, or that relationship still feels romantic to you, then it can still be a romantic relationship, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to end. But if, you're in a romantic relationship with someone and say, the sex ends, and then also those feelings of romance are gone away, or you're like, I just don't see this person that way anymore, I don't feel this way about that person anymore, then that's probably when you need to, I don't even know that the relationship necessarily needs to end. For some people, they're able to make transitions and they'll go, okay, we're not doing this anymore, but we can do this other thing. And then some people, they do need to end. Like I'm kind of a person that my relationships, they end. I'm just now getting to the place where they're doing these transition-y things. And I'm like, okay, like I'm gonna sit with that. Like, but normally I'm like, I always tell people I'm kind of on my Birdman. Is we finished or is we done? Like, so like once a relationship, like it's done, for me. So I'm just now getting to the place where I'm like, all right, I can kind of like, move in and out of these spaces with people and be okay. But some people, they're able to do that. My husband is that way, at least with his other partners. We're still, navigating through that space right now, but we have 17 years of stuff that we got to work through. But he's able to, kind of weave in and out of like what he's doing with a person. And some people are just able to do that. And so I don't think any relationships need to end. If you don't want them, they can transition into other things. But just because I think it's good to remember that just because you're that way doesn't mean the other person is that way. Okay. So just because you can kind of seem in and out of things and you don't want the relationship to end, or you're okay with certain things falling off and it not changing, what you feel or what the dynamic is, or, moving in and out of, we're partners and now we're friends and, we're friends with benefits, and, you're able to kind of do that. It does not mean that the other person that you're interacting with is able to do that. And you have to kind of be prepared for, this thing where you say, okay, well, I'm going to remove these things from the relationship, but I still kind of want it to continue. And have that person be like, yeah, that doesn't work for me. If this isn't here, we ain't this, and you have to kind of be okay with that. Because I find that what happens a lot is people will do that, especially in the non-monogamous community. And so another person will go, well, that doesn't work for me. I don't want to have a romantic relationship where I'm not having sex with the person, that doesn't work for me. Or, or I don't want to, I don't want to transition, into a friendship if we're not together anymore, and that kind of thing. And people will really judge that very harshly. And I don't think that's fair. I think because people are allowed to have the kinds of relationships that they want. And how is it any more selfish of the other person that they're not giving you what you want when you ain't giving them what they want? You know what I mean? So I don't really understand that. You made a choice and now they're making a choice, And so I think it's important to remember that just because how we organize love and how we organize relationships doesn't necessarily mean that the people that we're interacting with show up those same ways, which is why having alignment with the people that you interact with, it's so important. Having conversations with people as you're getting into relationships, like, hey, what happens if we end? What does our breakup strategy look like? Are you going to want to be friends after we, get together, if we break up, and blah, 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 having those conversations kind of early on, so that you have an idea of like what you're dealing with a person. And then also you're kind of seeing if you're interacting with people that you're in alignment with. So that way, if you get to those places with those people, you'll show up to that space similarly because you're in alignment about, how you think those things should be conducted. And so, yeah, so there was a question here in what is the best way to have the conversation with if feelings change while dating? I'm not really sure in a sense that, I mean, honestly, I feel like the best way to have any conversation is to be honest. I think it's also to acknowledge that it's painful for the person to hear. And I think that that's the piece that people miss out on, when they go, when they have those difficult conversations, um, is going like, hey, this is this is really hard for you to hear. And I totally want to validate that. And I totally want to acknowledge that this is painful. Like I have, my heart, I care about the fact that this thing that I'm sharing with you is going to be painful for you, or is likely going to be painful for you. And also it is still more caring for me to share this with you and to talk to you about this than it would be for me to pretend that this is not what's going on. So I am ultimately sharing this with you, that my feelings have changed, and talking about this with you because I care about you and not because I don't. Because if I didn't care about you, I would pretend, I would fake it. I would pretend. I would ghost you. You know what I mean? I would just dip, I am coming to you and I'm talking to you about my feelings changing because I want to be honest with you. And I want you to know, I want you to know where you stand with me. I don't want to lead you on. I don't want to lead you to believe that I feel a thing that I don't feel. I don't want to be dishonest with you. I am telling you this, even though it is painful, because I care about you and not because I don't. Because I don't want to hurt. I don't want to hurt you overall. So I'm hurting you right now, but I don't want to hurt you overall, And if I were to continue on in this relationship with my feelings change and not be honest with you, that would actually be more painful for you than if I tell you this thing right now. From Anonymous, I'm dating someone who is poly, but eventually I would like my own monogamous relationship. Am I setting myself up, or should I enjoy it now while also being open to dating other people? Are you setting yourself up? I don't think so, in a sense that, well, I mean, that's hard to answer. Like, if the relationship ends, it'll likely be painful, because relationships ending are painful. But I also don't think it's a bad thing to date someone polyamorous and also own that you want a monogamous relationship at some point. And while you're okay with the fact that you can't get it from this person, you're open to the opportunity of monogamy coming your way. What I will say is, if you know this, I think you really should tell that person that you're dating that that's what's going on, and so that they can they can understand that that's what's happening, and they can consent to knowing that they're like a placeholder. They're a filler. And that sounds a lot harsher than it actually is. I don't think it's a bad thing. Some people like that. Some people don't. That's not an issue for them. They're like, I don't mind being somebody's filler. I actually know a guy who has a partner who she just dates him in between people. So she's monogamous. She's monogamous. She likes monogamy. And when she meets someone that she can have monogamy with, they stop interacting. And then when she's in between partners, they'll interact again. And then, and they've been like this for years. He said he's been like this with this person for years. So some people have no issue with being able to do that. But I also think those are people that can do that seamless moving in and out of spaces with people, So they're like, okay, right now we're dating, we're romantic, that's great. And then you meet someone and you're monogamous, we have to shift to a friend space, that's fine. I think those are people that can just do that seamlessly, kind of moving in and out of types of relationships with the same person, and not have an issue. But I think it is important to tell the person that it's like, hey, my ultimate goal is monogamy. While I am enjoying my relationship with you, and I do like, being with you, and I like my relationship experience with you, this is not where I'm landing. So that way that person isn't seeing you as someone that they can like work towards. Because I think people think that in non-monogamy that we don't have our own ideas of committed partnership because we are dating so many other people, but we do. So we when we get into partnerships with people, the futures may not look the same as they do in monogamy, but we do think about the future with the people that we're with. And so if this person is interacting with you and they feel like they're developing a partnership of substance with you, they may be considering some kind of future, with you as their partner. And I think it's kind to let them know that that's not what you're thinking about. That you're not thinking about the future with this person. You're thinking about the here and now. And then once somebody comes along that offers you monogamy, that is important to you, and you're going to go and you're going to pursue that. And it's nothing negative about them. It's just they can't offer you the relationship model that most interests you and you most desire. But it doesn't mean that you can't enjoy what you have, up until that time comes. And you might be surprised. They might be like, okay, fine, that works. Because they might be, like I said, one of those people that can, kind of seem in and out, of that, or they might be like, that doesn't work for me. I don't want to be, somebody's in between, kind of person. And I think that goes back to that place of giving people the opportunity to like fully consent to what we're working with them with, and what we're coming to them with. And so yeah. Next question is, can you still be poly if you fluctuate between monogamy and ENM depending on your relationship? Absolutely. So there's actually a term called polymonoflux, or ambyamory, if I'm not mistaken. And they are people that can function in polyamorous and or monogamous relationships depending on who they're with. So they can meet a monogamous person and do monogamy. They can meet a polyamorous person and do polyamory, and it doesn't really, phase them. I have a couple of, I've met several people that consider themselves polymonoflux. And so it's almost like or like I said, ambiamorous, to where they, it depends on the person that they're with at the time, whether or not they're in a monogamous relationship or in a polyamorous relationship. They can do monogamy with people, they can do polyamory with people, and they're fine. I don't think I can personally. I just like the freedom of non-monogamy, even if I don't desire to date anybody else. So like right now I have one partner, that I'm just not in space right now. Not that I'm like closed off to dating, but I'm not actively seeking it either. But I'm not monogamous, and I have no desire to be monogamous. And even if I'm just at a capacity of where I just only want to date one person, because capacity wise, I only want to date one person. But I am not polymonoflux. That relationship, like it's still like with the understanding that at some point in our relationship, I am likely going to return back to having multiple partners. But there are people that can, navigate and move in between polyamorous relationships and monogamous relationships, and they're fine. So like I said, the term is actually called either polymonoflux or ambiamorous. They're actual terms for that. And it is very real. And people do it. What did it take for you to realize what you wanted out of a relationship? Trial and error. Trial and error. And then also just self-awareness, knowing myself, knowing, what's important to me, what's important to me about human beings, what's important to me about connection, what's important for me to feel, what's important to me to say about who I am in that relationship and what that relationship brings out of me. Because our relationships bring things out of ourselves. And so it's really, really important for me to, what can I say about my partner? What can I say about myself in that relationship? What can I say about my partner in relationship? What can I say about how I feel in that relationship? How I want to be made to feel? How I want to show up in that relationship? What I want to be able to say about that relationship? And it's continually asking myself those questions and then learning from the different relationships that I've found myself in the past. and going, oh, that absolutely worked. That absolutely did not work. Like, since like I've talked about my marriage is ending, one of the things that I've learned from that relationship, and it's really, really funny. So I don't know if there's anybody here that watches anime, but I'm sure there is. And my kids are like ridiculously into anime. And so I watch it periodically with them. So like I'm watching One Piece now because my son loves One Piece, all these different ones. And so, but I love the edgelords. Okay, so Levi, Sasuke, the edgelords. Okay, the edgelords. And so for anybody that doesn't know, but doesn't watch anime, an edgelord, they're usually someone that is very dark and brooding and like not very emotionally connected, and they're kind of flat. They're these like really, really, really like just very dark, like Spock. Think of like Dr. Spock and like Star Trek, just no emotion, kind of flat. And they'll express emotion, and then when they do, it's like rah, but it's usually like long, like few and far between. And so I always have a crush on the edgelords. Always have a crush on the edgelords. They're always my favorite character. They're always bae for me. And the reason why is because hang on. Excuse me. The reason why is because I am attracted to people that are very emotionally cut off. I don't know what it is, but something about that just does it for me. Okay, it does it for me. So the more flat you are, the more like reserved you are, the more I'm like, because I feel like they're like a puzzle. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm like, there's got to be some emotion in there. You know what I mean? And I'm gonna get it out. And so I'm very attracted to that. It does not work for me. Okay, at all. Okay, doesn't work. Doesn't work at all. Spent 17 years with somebody like that. It does not work. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. Because I'm an extremely emotional person, and I'm very connected to my emotions. And so I need people that are emotionally intelligent. I need people that are emotionally connective, because I need to have people in relationship that can connect to my emotional experience. That's important to me. And so even though I have this attraction, because of my experience, I've identified that does not work for me in relationship. As much as I may be attracted to it and drawn to it, it doesn't work for me in relationship. So how you, and even now as my marriage has ended, I'm in that place of reestablishing, what I want out of a relationship, because I had this huge relationship end, the 17-year relationship end. And as I'm looking out over my relationship future, I'm having to reassess and reevaluate what works for me and what doesn't. And some of those reassessments, like I said, what do I want to be able to say about myself in the relationship and how I show up? What do I want to feel in a relationship? What do I want to be able to say about my partner, and how they show up to me? What are my love languages? Which ones are, value me? How do I receive love? How do I, how do I feel love? What are the ways in which I feel love most clearly? And then how do I want to give love? How do I want to show up to giving love? And it's just going through asking yourself those questions, updating those things as they change, because they will change for us over time. As we grow, as we evolve, our capacity changes, those things will change for us. And so it's continually sort of asking ourselves, what matters most to us about connection, and what matters most to us about our relationships, and what matters most to us about the kinds of partners that we want to be and the kind of partners that we want to have. And I think that's how you find out what you want out of a relationship. How does one date while being non-monogamous? Are there apps, or is it just happenstance? It's a lot of things. It's happenstance. I met one of my partners at a bar one night. I went to a burner event and he was there. We randomly chit-chat and found out he was poly. I've used dating apps. I had a partner that I met on OkCupid. I've met people. My current partner, I met him at a kink party, randomly. We had a mutual friend, and he invited me to the party, and my partner happened to be there. And so it just, it kind of just happens. If you want to be more like directed or precise about dating apps are great. They are a little challenging, just because most of the people on them are monogamous. I think one of the best dating apps, like the more standard dating apps for polyamory is OkCupid. A lot of people find people on OK. Like I said, I met a partner on OkCupid. I know a lot of poly people that are on OkCupid. There are some poly apps that are coming up. There's #open. There's another one called Field that I know of. I feel like there was one called Threesome Connect, which, but whatever, if that's your thing, cool. Like, that's fine. And I think there's another one actually that just popped up called Elite Poly, that I got like an invite to or something like that. Yeah, so there are and as polyamory becomes more mainstream, there are more more options. But I feel like OkCupid is probably one of the better ones just because it's a more established dating app. And then two, sometimes dating apps are a little challenging. Like I remember I did Field, I want to say, and #open, and it was just exactly. Somebody said Field is full of the whites. It's full of the whites, okay? And I live in San Diego, so it's definitely full of the whites. And then it's also full of people just looking for threesomes, like over and over and over and over and over again, and looking for like short-term hookups, which was really frustrating because I remember like even talking to someone on there, and they were asking me what I was looking for, and I was like, oh, just connection, somebody that I vibe with, whatever, blah blah blah. And he literally was like, I don't know what's up with this app. He was like, this app was created for people to hook up, but it seems like people want like real connection and relationship. And I was like, and in my mind, I was like, even if I was just a random hookup, like, wouldn't you treat me with respect? Like, I was just like, it was just bizarre to me that I was like, this is where you like took it, like, so because like even if we were just hooking up, I would still want you to treat me like a human being, like, so yeah, so it is a lot of like wading through stuff. And so you have to kind of be prepared for that. I have to take breaks sometimes from online dating because I'm like, I just cannot deal with this sometimes. So I'll like get off the apps and then get back on and get off the apps and get back on. I also think that Facebook groups are really good resources for dating. So there are a lot of like really good Facebook polyam groups that are Black specific. That people have found relationships in. There's Poly Black and Dating. There is, I think there's one called Poly Coast to Coast. Like, there's a lot. Honestly, there's a bunch of. I'm not in a lot of them. I left them for no real reason other than I just, wasn't interacting with them a whole lot. And then plus with, my marriage ending and my husband's in those groups, I was just like, let me just go ahead and get out for a little bit and heal. So I'm not in them, but they're great resources for meeting Black poly people, meeting Black poly people to date. There's also the Polycultural Diversity Alliance, and they put on an event called Black Poly Pride, which I don't think they're doing this year, but they're going to be doing next year. I think they said 2022 is the year that they're going to do it. And that's a great like group to kind of be in. And they actually have a Facebook group, but I can't think of the name of it. I think it's Black Poly Reality or something like that. And so they have like a weekend where you get together and it's a bunch of Black people and Black poly people and honestly like the Poly Black and Dating used to have a big polyam Halloween party every year before the COVID, and it was one of the most affirming experience I ever had because to be in a room full of 250 300 people that are all Black and all poly was fantastic. Like because like I said, I come from San Diego. Our community here is super white. And it gets tiring. Like after a while, I stopped going because I was just like, I'm just not, and not that they're not nice people. And, I've made some great friends and all of those things like that. But I was just like, I can't keep doing this. I just can't keep doing this. And so, yeah, so like I said, there's dating apps, there's happenstance, there's Facebook groups. I also find that in a lot of like kink communities, you can find poly people, and a lot of like tantric spaces, people that do like, tantra and, sex positive stuff. There's usually a lot of people that are non-monogamous. And so if those are like, areas of interest for yourself or things around like sexual healing, sexual exploration, you can often find people that are non-monogamous. And so, there are people that are out there. They're just not as like readily, findable as like, just an average monogamous person, but they're there. There are a variety of ways that you can access them. What discussions should you have with your current partner before dating? So I'm assuming that this question refers to like if you have a partner that you're entering into non-monogamy with. And so what like discussion should you have with your current partner before dating? You should have a discussion around, I think the things that you should talk about are what kinds of considerations you're willing to make and you want to have in dating other people. Having conversations around disclosure. So, like, what will we talk about with regards to our relationships with other people, and what won't we talk about? What do you want to know, and what don't you want to know? And I find that this one is super crucial because a lot of people have different privacy needs in non-monogamous relationships. And so you may have one person that wants to talk about all the things and share all the things, and you may have another person that's like, I really, really, really only want to give you the specifics, you know, but I don't want to be super detailed. And so it's really, really, really good to have a conversation about what are we going to share about our other relationships and what aren't we going to share about our other relationships. I think it's also really good to have conversations around like what your desire is for like interacting with the people that your partner is dating. So having conversations around like when you might want to meet someone that your partner is dating, or if you even want to meet someone that your partner is dating. Some people don't, you know. And so having conversations around like what that looks like. And then also navigating conflict. It's really, really, really good to have conversations around navigating conflict, because you may think you entered in a relationship with a person that's like, oh, we got conflict down. Like we've been together for a while, so we know how to do this. But you're going to be having entirely new conflicts. Okay, conflicts that like you have never had before. They're going to be bringing up emotions that you've never had before. And so having conversations around like what to do when we're experiencing conflict, and when or if we're experiencing jealousy, what kinds of reassurances that you need. I think this is really, really, really important conversation to have that people don't talk about because they don't really want to admit this. But we don't sit in the space of having a conversation with our partner and go, you know, when I think about you being with someone else, this is what comes up for me. This is what I feel. These are the insecurities that come up when I sit and I just think about you being with somebody else. Like, this is what comes up for me. I worry that you'll find them more attractive than me. I worry that they'll be better in bed than I am. I worry that, you know, they'll be able to provide for you in a way that I can't provide for you, or, you know, those kinds of things. And so we don't often talk to our partners about, like, when I project into the future of your non-monogamy, like, these are the things that come up for me. And these are the areas where I feel like I'm going to need a little support, or I'm going to have a little sensitivity that I want you to be mindful of. We don't often talk about those things when we get into non-monogamy. So I think it's really important to talk about that. And I also think it's really important to establish some sort of shared commitment to education about it. So, like, can we have a book that we read together? Or can we agree to, like, listen to a particular podcast episode and then come together and talk about what came forward for us? Like, I don't think people really do that. You know, so they just go, okay, well, we're going to be non-monogamous. Yeah, what they focus on is, well, let's find people to date. Let's find, and they don't really sit and think about, well, how are we as a couple growing together in our learning of this relationship model so that we can operate and navigate in it well. Or you'll have one person that's doing that and the other person isn't, so you'll have one person that's reading all the books and watching all the podcasts and, developing their knowledge, and the other person is just, not concerned. And I think that's not helpful. I definitely experienced that in my relationship. That was really frustrating. As I was like, okay, like, I'm trying to learn about this, and I'd like this to be something that we did together. And my partner just didn't. So they were just like, no, and I think it did, it affected our relationship, because while I showed up in a much more volatile way, okay, because I had much more stronger emotions, but I think that because they didn't do a lot of, learning, they didn't see the ways in which they showed up that probably weren't the best for me, and so most of the focus was on, you're just off the rails. And it wasn't like, yeah, but there are a lot of things that you do that you don't do well that contribute to, why we have the issues that we have. And because you're not getting this outside education that's objective, so you can't hear it objectively from me. But if you heard it in a book somewhere, you might be like, oh, you know what I mean? Because it's an objective voice. And so I think it's really, really important to establish some kind of like shared like commitment to how are we going to learn about this together so that we can grow in how to operate in this together. And so, yeah. After deciding to establish more commitment, is there something one should keep in mind? So I'm assuming this means like establishing more commitment in a relationship. Non-monogamous
Oh,
relationships. What?
just want to throw it. So to clarify, so say you get past the dating phase with the with whomever you're dating, and you figure, okay, let's move above that dating realm to where it's an actual established relationship with whoever this new person was. That's where the question was kind of going to.
Um, so I think it's important to remember that commitment in non-monogamy looks very different because usually in monogamy, what we see as commitment is you move in together, you have kids, you invest your finances, you get married. We have these like, external things that we see as commitment. So I think it's important to keep in mind that you and your partner are going to have to come up with what commitment looks like for you. You're going to have to define that yourselves. Because it's likely that you're not going to have a lot of these different things that we see as signifying commitment. So making sure that you are, you know, collaborating with this person and going, what does this relationship being committed mean to you? What things do you need to see reflected on my end that signify to you that I'm committed to you? What things do you need me to do to signify to me, to signify to you that I'm committed to you? So I think it's what is important to remember, especially in non-monogamy, is that commitment is very personal to each individual relationship. And so what commitment looks like is going to look different. So what commitment looks like for your local partner that lives 20 minutes away that you can see once a week is going to look starkly different than commitment from your long distance partner that you only see maybe 3 or 4 times a year. And so really being intentional about defining what commitment is for your individual relationships is important, because it's not, like I said, it's not like monogamy where we just have these things that we just automatically, like, in monogamy, it's your commitment means you decided to be exclusive with one another, and then it usually follows that escalator. You move in, you have kids, and you might flip the order around a little bit, but we usually have these like telltale things that signify this is a committed relationship in monogamy. And then like my partner now, like, I'm never going to move in with him, possible, but I doubt it. We're not going to have kids together. We're never going to get married. We're never going to have our, enmeshed lives in a way. But we are very committed to working, committed to our partnership to one another, but we have to define what commitment looks like for us. And we have to define what we each need so that we can feel like the other person is committed to us. And making sure that we want to give those person those things that they need in order to feel committed. It's like, because some people, like for instance, some person may say, in order for me to feel commitment to you, I want a hierarchy. I want to be first. And you may not want to do that. You know what I mean? That may not be something that you're willing to do. So it's important that you are getting together and establishing a shared language around what commitment, and a shared idea around what commitment is for your individual relationship, so that you're on the same page. So we have a question here in the chat. It says, my current partner has a dom, but she's more into me and has chosen me over him a few times. I feel like she holds on to him because of their history. Should I bother having a clarification conversation or just continue to let it rock out? Um, I think that you should have a conversation. I mean, if you want to talk to the person about it, you can, but also approach that gingerly, because most people don't really respond well to someone saying like, this is what I see about your relationship, you know, especially when it's something like that. That's kind of tender. So I think how I would probably have a conversation about it, if I felt the necessity to, is maybe ask the person like, you know, about the relationship, and like, you know, going like, how are you feeling in that relationship? You know, do you feel valued? Do you feel cared for? What is your value for that relationship? So like, you know, what does it bring to you? You know, asking them that kind of question, like, you know, what is it, you know, what is that relation? What do you get from that relationship? What does it bring to you? You know, and then you might get a better idea of like, you know, why they choose to be in it. I also think that we have to understand that a lot of times people are in an NRE space with us, so a new relationship energy space with us. So if you're a newer partner, the relationship may still be a little bit fresher to your partner in a way that, you know, their relationship with their dom is not. And so that might be some of what you're seeing. There's no way to know, you know, I'm not sure, you know, because I don't know all of the particulars of the situation, but it is also likely that, and that's not to devalue your partner's regard for you, but just the relationship is newer and fresher. And like, what do kids do with a new toy? You know what I mean? Like, you know, you know, they're really excited about it, and they usually want to play with it a little bit more than the toys that they've had for a little while. And so I think that if it's something to where it causes problems or like animosity um, with you and the other person, you know, to where like say the dom is struggling with that, and it, you know, it reflects on maybe how they interact with you if you have interaction with the person. Then I might have a conversation with my partner about it and be like, hey, like, you know, do you still feel good in that relationship? Are you still getting things from that relationship that you appreciate? Um, you know, and just kind of ask them a question about it. But like I said, I would approach it with kind of caution. I don't think I would say like, I think that you're like, you know, you just stay with that person because of history and blah 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 blah. Most people would probably be like, you know, they probably wouldn't react very well to that, even if it was true. Like, they might not react super well to that initially. And so I would say like approach that with caution and ask questions before you like give them your like diagnosis, you know? So if you just went to them and said, hey, I just think you're with this person because of history, that's giving them like a diagnosis. But that's not asking them what their relationship experience is. So ask about, I would do it from a space of asking about their relationship. So from Anonymous, how do you avoid fucking up your kids with your poly lifestyle, especially if the kid's other parent doesn't support it like mine? So first of all, I don't think the poly lifestyle fucks up kids. And my kids have known that I've been non-monogamous for pretty much like the entire time that we've been non-monogamous. So we've actually been non-monogamous more than we've been monogamous. So I don't even know if they remember when we were monogamous. And like I said, my husband and I are separating. And still, I don't feel like it fucks up kids' lives. I think it just gives kids an option. You know, I think I think it just shows them that there are a variety of ways to, you know, connect to human beings. There is no one size fits all. I think where it veers into the territory of possibly fucking kids' lives up is if you're making poor choices in like who you have them around. You know, if your priorities, you know, aren't in the right place. So if you're more concerned about hanging out with your partners than you are about making time for your kids, you know, those kind of things I think are things that kind of fuck up kids. But I mean, that can be applied to a variety of things, you know. So I don't think it's just poly where that happens. You can do that with your job, you know, you can do that with your friends. You know, so I think those are kinds of things. I don't think it's polyamory itself that messes up kids. I think it's more how people conduct themselves in it that causes the problems. And you know, if the kid's other parent doesn't support it, I think you're just honest about that. So I think you go, you know, your other parent doesn't agree with this thing that I do, and they get to have their opinion about that. But I get to live the life that I choose. And I think that's actually a valuable lesson to show kids, honestly, is that everybody doesn't always have to agree with what you're doing. But it doesn't mean that you still shouldn't do it. If it's important to you and it has value. I think where this can become tricky is if the parent is slandering your character because you're non-monogamous to the kids. And if that is something that occurs, I think it would be wise to like have a conversation with the other parent if that's possible and say, hey, I get that you don't agree with this thing that I do, but I would appreciate it if you weren't slandering my character to our children, you know, because that's just not healthy, you know, so that's just not a healthy thing to do. Um, and hopefully, you know, you have a person that is reasonable enough to be able to understand that. If you don't, then I think that I would just kind of tell the kids, you know, your other parent doesn't really like this about me. And they get to have their opinion about it, but I also get to live the life that I want. I want you to develop your own opinion about it and about me, you know, because of it. And just kind of, you know, sort of live your truth, and then just be open to them being able to talk to you about it and kind of go, well, you know, my parents said this about you, or I think this about this, or why can't you, blah, 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 blah. You know, just being open and honest with kids. I'm always on the route of just being honest with children. I think that we don't give them a lot of credit for what they can handle mentally and emotionally. And I also think that we have a tendency to like kind of insult kids' intelligence a lot. And that's just not something that I want to do with my kids. So I've always been very honest with my children about my relationships with everybody, their dad, you know, my partners. I had my daughter just ask me the other day, you know, because like I said, my husband and I are splitting up, and she asked me about his other partner, and she was like, "Are y'all still friends? You know, do you still talk to her?" And I was like, "Yeah, we talk sometimes. And, you know, it's cool." And so I'm very, very honest with my kids about who I am as a person. Fortunately, though, I have a partner who's also non-monogamous, so I'm not dealing with that, which I know is a totally different, you know, animal. And I know that there are some times where, you know, there can be some cases where the parent tries to use your non-monogamy as fodder for taking your kids. Or limiting your access to them, which is, it's totally valid. It's totally happens. And unfortunately, I wish I could say, well, the law is on your side or the court's on your side or whatever, you know. So you know, if you feel like that is possible, you know, to where you could actually lose access to your children based on this, then absolutely, like, you know, keep it under wraps. Don't say anything. Like, you know, they don't really need to know. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not one of those people that judges that need for safety. You know, I feel like if it comes from like, you know, losing your kids or losing access to your kids and maybe just having to hide it a little bit, hide it. You know what I mean? So, you know, because I don't think it's worth losing access to your children over it. But if it's just, you know, you have a partner or, you know, you have a co-parent who's just hostile, then, you know, that's one of them things I'm like, well, they're going to take that shit to the Lord in prayer because we're not together no more, you know, and I'm living my life. And I get to have the relationship that I want to have with my kids, you know, and I get to have the honesty that I want to have with my kids. And you're not going to affect that, you know, because you got a problem with it, you know? So, you know, I don't want to hide from my children if I don't have to hide from my kids. And so, yeah, but definitely if it's like, you know, if it's a custody thing and you feel the necessity to hide, absolutely. Um, Next one. I understand that using a calendar is common practice to avoid double booking and let your partners know who with who when. I saw on one couple talk about no longer using it because it appeared to be used in passive aggressive ways. What are your thoughts on this? I've never. So if the person is here that wants to answer this question, if they can talk about the way in which it was used passive aggressively, I've never seen that. And so are you, Hito, you want to speak to that?
Yes, literally, the run of questions, these are like literally like, okay, these are some thoughts that might come up. I just riddled out a bunch of questions. And so for that one is more, so in that situation, by the passive aggressive, like one partner might have like like four different dates within a given 2 weeks, while the other partner doesn't have anything. It's kind of like showing off, I guess, was what they were discussing on why they stopped using the calendar, because it came off as if, "Ooh, I got this, and I got this, oh, and I got this," while the other person is just chilling at home, unable to, you know, get any kind of like date or connections. It just comes off as if one person is just showing all the good that's going on, while the other person is, I guess, to show off in a sense. Like it came off as if they're trying to show off.
Okay. I honestly feel like that's a person's personal feeling thing. And not like you can feel that way, but like also if this person is trying to let you know what they got going on logistically, like, and that was an agreement, like, why would you see that as that? I'll say this: if you feel like you have a partner that wants to flex on you in that way, your issue ain't the calendar. Okay, your issue is that you have a partner that's kind of an asshole. Like, you know what I'm saying? So your issue is not the partner. Like, you know what I mean? It's really not. Like, you know, it's not the calendar. You know, your issue is that you believe that you have a partner that seeks to one up you in dating. That's the problem, and that's where you need to, you know, you need to you know, direct your attention to, not the fucking calendar, but you know, the fact that I believe that I have a partner that likes to one up me in dating. And because that's the real problem to me. But if you agree that we're going to have this calendar so that we are able to know where we're going to be, and we have this thing that we can just look at right away, and your partner is just filling it out with the stuff that they got going on, then assuming that they're doing it because they're trying to one up you, to me suggests that you have a poor opinion of who your partner is as a person, you know? Um, and you know, if you're feeling, and it's totally okay to feel a sense of like, you know, envy that your partner has all of these connections and you don't. I've totally been there. Okay, like absolutely 100% been there. I've been the partner without a partner, you know, at times. My husband always seemed to be able to find people to have relationships with, where I was just constantly dating, but like, you know, I had all these like, you know, like these relationships that just would not get off the ground, you know. And so it's totally okay to feel a sense of envy that your partner seems to have a poppin', you know, calendar or a poppin' experience and you don't. But I think it's important to remember, number one, your partner may, you know, be interacting with people more. They may be more of an extrovert. They may be more social, like, you know what I mean? Or, you know, they just, I don't know, like, you know what I mean? Those things ebb and flow. And I think it's important to, rather than like looking at what somebody else has going on in their non-monogamy, just focus on what you want your landscape to look like and what's going on in your landscape. And that's really, really, really hard to do when you're in relationship with someone, because you have access to what, like, I can do that with my friends a lot easier because I have a degree of separation from what their you know, polyamory is like. But with my partners, it's kind of like happening right there in front of my face, and so that's a little bit trickier. But I think that is part of that self-work piece of not comparing your polyamory experience to your partner's polyamory experience, because they're a totally different person. And so, of course, they're going to have a different experience than you are, because they're a completely different person. And I think one of the things that happens when people get into non-monogamy, especially when they enter it from a coupled space, is they sort of have this belief that they're a shared entity, so they're going to have a shared experience. So the way a person's non-monogamy journey is going to go for their partner is how it's going to go for you. So if they're successful, you're going to be successful. If they don't have success, you know, and I use that in quotations because that's relative, you know, then you're not going to have success. I think polyamory for me was one of the first times when I felt what I call like the breaking apart of my husband and us turning into two individuals in a shared unit of relationship rather than two people that made a unit. You know what I mean? Like, you know, so it's like, you know, so we weren't two people that were smashed together into like an amalgam, you know, entity. We are two separate people in a relationship with each other. And it was hard for me because I felt for a lot of our non-monogamous experience that he just had a better time of it than I did. And it was really, really hard for me to do. But like, I didn't look at that as like something that he was doing to, you know, like I said, one up me or show me up, but just he was having the experience that he was having based on what he was doing, you know, and I was having the experience that I was having based on what I was doing. And so I think in a situation like that, like I said, I think your issue is not the calendar. It's that you feel that you have a partner who, you know, seeks to one up you. But I also feel like maybe what that person was trying to communicate is that the calendar was affecting their peace, which is different. So if they weren't thinking like, okay, I know my partner isn't doing this to like one up me or to for showmanship. However, I'm noticing that I'm struggling with a bunch of different difficult emotions about my lack of engagement, you know, compared to their engagement. And so for my own sense of peace, I'm going to abolish the calendar so that I'm not going through this. That's totally okay to me. Like, you know, I mean, that makes sense. That to me is healthy of going, this is not, you know, this keeps taking from my peace. And if it's not necessary and I don't need it and I can find a way to not have it and reestablish my sense of peace around this, then, you know, why not go ahead and do that? So I think that's a little bit different than kind of going, well, you know, my partner's trying to show me up. Because like I said, if you have a partner that's trying to show you up, that's your real issue, not the calendar. Can you share good practices in regards to communication? So yes. So I find that it helps to ask someone, especially if you know that they're going to be receiving some information that might be uncomfortable for them. I think it's best to ask someone like, "Hey, are you in a space to receive this?" You know. So, hey, I have something uncomfortable that I want to talk about. Are you in a space to receive this? I think it's important to do that. I think it's important to honor when we're not in a space to receive something. Say, I want to have this conversation with you. I just can't do it right now. And so can we put a pin in this to come back to it? I also think it's important at the onset of a conversation to establish an intention for the conversation. What are we hoping to do in this conversation? How are we hoping to come out of this conversation having felt? I want to feel heard. I want to feel understood. I want to feel empathized with. I want to return to the loving connection that we share. I want to us to have collaborated on a solution to this conflict. Establishing a shared sense of purpose for the communication is helpful. So that way you both have a direction to go into. So you have an intention set, you have a guidepost of like, hey, this is what we're trying to do here. There's actually a really, really, really good TED Talk that I'll have to try to find a link for. And it was talking about what we do when we are in conflict. It was like a way in which that we can talk to one another so that so it was how to have constructive conversations when in conflict. So choose curiosity over clash. That was the first one. So when someone is communicating with you or you're communicating during conflict, I have a mantra that I created called before you get upset, get curious. So before you get upset with a person for this thing that they're saying or they're doing, I mean, obviously if the language is something that's abusive or incendiary, so if they are calling you out your name or, they're saying mean or harsh things, you get upset about that stuff. But if someone's saying something that's a little bit uncomfortable for you to hear, it's a little bit difficult, or it pings you in a way, before you get upset about this thing that they're saying, get curious. Go, why did you say that? Why do you think that? Why is that your perception? Ask, before you choose clash and you choose combativeness, choose curiosity. Try to get behind why this person is communicating or why they're saying what it is that they're saying. And then the next one was expect development of your ideas through discussion. So as you're discussing whatever you're discussing with your partner, you're trying to get their perspective and their side so you can round out your idea of what happened based on them and their perspective and them being a part of what's going on between you two. So expect to be flexible, not too flexible, because I think that can veer into the space of being manipulated, So it is important to learn how to hold on to your experience, hold on to your emotions, hold on to like how you see things and your perspective, while also allowing for flexibility of thought around your partner's perspective, your partner's experience, your partner's emotions and feelings. And so expect to develop your ideas about the conflict and to develop your ideas about the situation and develop your ideas about what you're communicating about through discussion. That's why you're in a discussion, is because you're trying to develop the full picture with the collaboration of the person that you're talking to. And then the last one was anchor in a common purpose, which is what is something that we can agree is a shared desire for the outcome of this discussion. So setting an intention for the conversation, setting an intention for when the conversation gets escalated. So what are we, getting tools for de-escalation? How are we going to de-escalate this? Are we going to take a 5-minute pause? Are we going to stop and just remind each other to breathe? Are we going to, stop this conversation at a certain period of time and go, we're not going to discuss this past this point. And if we need to come back to it, we can come back to it. I also think that another good thing for communication, especially when it comes to conflict and non-monogamy, is processing some of the messier portions of your emotions, what I call off stage. So there are some parts of my emotional process that my partners just don't need to be there for, like they don't need to be present for. And so I find that when I learned how to do a little bit more of my own processing on my own or with a friend, I was able to come to my partners with much more concise package of my emotions and my feelings. And it was a lot more easy for them to digest them, as opposed to coming to them with this huge, like messy plate of just emotions just piled all over the place, that I hadn't even sorted through. And if you have partners that have a shorter bandwidth for emotional processing than you do, like I have, I find that it's a lot better it aids communication when your message is clear and concise. And then just remembering to be honest, but honesty with compassion and kindness. I'm a person whose honesty can be very sharp and blunt. And I know that I'm not trying to hurt a person in what I'm saying, but it doesn't mean that things that I'm not saying are hurtful. And so it's important to be, bye. But it's important to be honest and kind, and like to communicate your honesty in a way that is kind and compassionate. And then I think like remembering to assume, the best about our partners, assume the best about the people that we're interacting with. They're not trying to hurt us. And so remembering that in communication. And then also another thing that I've done when I was communicating sometimes difficult emotions and they were kind of messy, I would tell my partners that beforehand. I'm like, hey, I'm having a difficult emotion right now, and it might come out kind of prickly, and I would kind of preface and kind of brace them for that, so that they knew that, that was going on. And then as far as communication around like things like logistics or relationships or dates or things like that, that's going to be highly individualized. So have a conversation with your partner about it. Like like I said, what kind of things do we want to talk about? What kind of things do we not want to talk about? When do you want to know when I'm going on a date? When don't you want to know when I'm, going on a date? What does a date mean to you? Like, you know what I mean? Because I think sometimes they're like, oh, we'll say, okay, well, I want to know when you're going on a date. And then you find out your partner went out with somebody and you get upset about that. And sorry, my cats, get down. Hang on, I'll be right back. Get out of my plate. Move. I had some food on the counter and they thought they came up on a come up. So I was like, they are not going to take my chicken. But anyways, so just having a conversation with your partner about, like I said, disclosure. What do you want to talk about our relationships? What don't you want to talk about? What things do you want to share? What things don't you want to share? What does privacy look like for you? What does privacy, not what does secrecy look like for you? What does transparency look like for you? Having conversations about those things early on, so that you're on the same page about what that looks like for one another, or you at least know what each other's stance is. And so that can help inform like how you communicate with one another. And then just, like a kid, don't say stuff to people you wouldn't want said to you, things like that. So the golden rule. The next one is it possible to maintain friendship with your meta, and does that get weird at all? It absolutely is possible. I have wonderful, wonderful friendships with my metamors now. I am still friends with my husband's partner, the one he's had for the longest. He also has a partner who I absolutely cannot stand and don't talk to. So, and so what I tell people is all metaships matter, okay? So you may have metamors that you love and you vibe with, and I've literally told my partner, I'm like, if we break up, I'm keeping them. Like, that's what I told them, you know what I mean? I said, I'm keeping your folks, you know? And then I've had metamors that I'm like, I don't even want to see that person, okay? Like, it really varies. But it is possible to maintain friendships with your metamors. It does get weird sometimes, but I mean, honestly, our regular relationships get weird sometimes, you know? So I think they just get weird in different ways. But it can get weird at occasion, but you just talk about it, you navigate through it. And so, yeah, I think it's important to remember that I feel like the best metamor relationships are the ones where your soul connecting, you know, pin isn't the fact that you have a shared partner, because that can change, you know. And so I think the best metamor relationships are ones where it's like, even if you weren't dating my partner, you are still someone that I would enjoy. Because my partner has definitely dated people that I'm like, if it was not for the fact that you were dating my partner, I would literally have no interaction with you whatsoever, no interest in you as a person. And so I don't feel like having a shared partner is reason enough to build a whole entire relationship with a person around. I just don't. So for me, the best metamor relationships are the ones where you connect around other things that aren't just the partner. Um, and so and also to be mindful of the fact that just because you want a friendship with your metamor may not necessarily mean that they want a friendship with you. And so you have to really, really, really be careful with that too, because a lot of people will be like, oh, kitchen table poly, and I want to be friends with all my metas and all this stuff like that. And they'll push in and they'll be very pushy about that. And it can be off-putting. So I would deal with that sometimes as my partner's wife. And I mean, I understand, you know, or my husband's wife, and I understand where that comes from. But sometimes the women that he dated would just be, you know, on me, and it would really bother me because I'd be like, girl, like, I'd be like, you don't need to, like, you know, do this in order to have your relationship with him. You like him, boo. Like, you know what I mean? Like, leave me alone. That's kind of how I would feel sometimes. And I understood that part of the reason why they did that was because, like, this belief that it's like, well, I have to get in good with the wife so she doesn't cause issues, you know, for my relationship with my partner, you know, with her husband. But we didn't operate that way. Like, I was like, your relationship with him is separate from mine. And if you and I are going to be friends with one another, like, you know, that'll develop, but you don't need to be super angsty about it. But, you know, they were so hell bent on us being friends that for me, it was very off-putting, because for me, the metamor space is a tricky space. And so I don't just jump into friendships with my metamors right away. I have a tendency to be very cautious in that space. And so I think it's important to remember that just because you want to have a friendship with your metamors, and that's noble, doesn't necessarily mean that they also share that same desire, or they share that same desire to the extent to you do. And you need to be okay when that doesn't happen. And try not to take that, you know, personal, because some people really take that stuff very personally, and it can cause a lot of issues. And it said, would fighting for a relationship be considered a toxic trait of monogamy that is still carried? Fighting for a relationship. I'll say fighting for a relationship when you're the only one that's fighting probably is. So, because I think when that happens, that veers into the space of not respecting someone's boundaries. So if you're both fighting for the relationship and you're both fighting for a way back to one another, I think, you know, I don't think that that's toxic. I think it's two people deciding that what they still have in the relationship, they still see value there in the relationship, even if it's buried under a lot of stuff, you know, but they still see value there. And so they're both willing to fight through all that stuff to try to see if they can reconnect to that, that value that they both have. I think that when it's one person doing the fighting, that comes from a place of not wanting to let go, and wanting to hold on and cling to a person. And that can veer into the territory of not respecting a person's boundaries. So, like, I'll give an example. You know, when my husband ended our relationship, I didn't fight it. Like, I didn't fight for, no, we got to stay together and we got to figure this out and give me one more chance. I didn't do that, because in my mind, he instituted a boundary. I no longer wish to have this with you anymore. I don't want to do this. And until he changes that boundary, I'm not going to press in on it, because that to me is me not respecting his wishes and me imposing my will for our interaction onto him when he doesn't want that. So I don't think it's wrong to fight for a relationship when both people are still fighting, but when it's just one person, sort of pressing upon the other person to keep a particular type of relationship going, I think that's where it becomes, like it veers into the space of being unhealthy, because I think that's pressing against someone's boundary. And I think it's also taking advantage sometimes of the fact that this person loves you and they don't want to hurt you. And so they may not be being as abrupt and as direct as they probably should be being, because you just won't take no for an answer. You won't let it go. And because they love you and they care about you and they don't want to hurt you, they're trying to do that as softly as possible. And it's kind of, like I said, it kind of takes advantage of them and is a little unfair, And so for me, once somebody kind of says, I don't want this with you anymore, or we're done, or this relationship isn't working for me, or it's not healthy, or I don't feel supported, and they're not willing to work with you to, give you some things that you might be able to do to salvage it. I think that's when you kind of need to let it go, and not kind of press in, because I think when you do that pressing in and that pushing in, that's that kind of holding on and clinging to a person and kind of not wanting them to, have their own agency and autonomy for how they want to interact with you. You're just going, give me what I want, and I don't think that's healthy. So, and I think that was the last question that I had. It was, yes. Okay, so we're done. I made it through the questions. If there's any more, anyone wants to ask anything, you can unmute yourself and ask if there's anything that came forward for you that you wanted more clarity on, or you can put it in the chat. But I'm going to turn this over to Hito. Thank you so much.
Yeah, really do appreciate your insight and everything you shared. Yeah, everyone, like she said, if anyone had like a question that they maybe thought of on the spot, go for it. No, it seems like everyone appears to be good. And let's see. Yeah, it seems like everyone appears to be good. If that is the case, we can go ahead and end it here. I do appreciate everyone coming out. I see Rowdy on camera. Did you have something to say? He just wanted to blow kisses.
Just wanted to express my gratitude and thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Well, all right, everyone. I do appreciate you all coming out here. Again, thank you, Miss Evita Lavitaloca, for taking time with us today. Like I said, you're the resident person, so I'll come up with something else. I will be sending you a message if I come up with like another topic. Just go ahead and like bother you with. So
it's totally okay. I welcome it.
Perfect. Tiana, the one that left, the one I invited, that's the next one I plan on coordinating. I'm having ideas of going to the space of queer, just LGBTQ plus, as well as in the poly realm, because more times than not, even if you look at all the Black and poly groups, they are more so heteronormative. And so I had this topic idea of, queer LGBTQ people in the polyam space, so that way you can get, kind of see what their grievances are, or things that they may have, like they personally might need to like see or discuss or share. So that's the next event I have planned. No date has been set. I'm gonna be coordinating with her later. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have.
Hito, I'm hosting a POC discussion on June 6th. Next month is Pride Month, and the topic is, the POC LGBTQ space. I would love to send you some information and have you join us for that. And, you could co-lead it if you liked.
I'm sure I'm down for it.
Sunday, June 6th, I'll send you a message.
All right, cool. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Y'all have a great night. Again, thank you, Miss Sawyer. Thank you, everyone, BK, and those friends of BK's that joined us. Y'all have a good night. Be safe. And yeah, that's all I got.
Thank
Peace
you.
out, y'all.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much.